A couple more notes before I begin. One, I've tweeted out a link to these slides, so you can look at them and share them later on. And two, I am planning to leave time for questions, so please have some good ones ready for me when I finish with my slide deck. Okay. Well, I'm so happy to be here on World Information Architecture Day to talk with you about giraffes. Giraffes are intelligent, emotional animals with complex social lives. And as a result of a planning process we call evolution, they have excellent eyesight and stand 20 feet tall. So they can see threats and opportunities at a distance and plan accordingly. And that's really the point of this talk. Now, I want to talk with you about my new book, which just came out a week ago, Planning for Everything. But to explain why I wrote it and how it relates to findability and misinformation and the theme of IA for good, I need to tell you my life story. Don't worry, it's a short version. So, back in the early 90s, I went to library school right here at the University of Michigan, and I fell in love with the internet. And I had a dream. I wanted to organize information so that people could find what they need. And that's precisely what I've done. Over the years, I've helped a wide variety of organizations with their information architecture and user experience challenges. And along the way, I've written a number of animal books about information architecture and findability and search. And to introduce the next book, I think it's worth quickly retelling the story of my work with the Library of Congress. Back in 2009, the library asked me to provide an evaluation of the library's web presence. And I soon found that the library had more than 100 websites, all with different identities and navigation systems. And so in my report, I was brutally honest. I compared the library's web presence to the Winchester Mystery House. It's not bad to look at, but it's a findability nightmare. Now, this report was a shock to the system, and at one point was put under an embargo. It was going to upset too many people, so it couldn't be shared. But eventually, the leadership team decided that the library needed to change how they work on their web. They needed more centralization. They formed a web governance board with representatives of all the major units of the library. And they asked me to come back and help to shape web strategy and the information architecture. And we made some real progress. I'm proud of the work that we did together. But we didn't go nearly as far as I had hoped. And part of the reason for that is we didn't do a great job of planning for people and politics and pushback. And so around that time, I began to argue that we in this community need to have the courage to wrangle with culture and governance. Because everything is deeply intertwined. So, since library school, there were some bumps along the road, but it's fair to say a quarter century slipped by like a dream. And then in 2016, something happened that threw me for a loop. The election that year painfully aware of the extent to which many people in our society have totally lost track of the truth. Immune to science and facts, they're easily misled and often simply believe what they want. Now, for someone with a background in library and information science, this was especially disturbing. And it wasn't just political, it was personal. I had an argument with a family member about racism and climate change that seriously damaged our relationship. And I also began to really question my career. Around that time, I was working with a Fortune 500, and the folks in their user experience group didn't really seem to care about users or the truth. So I experienced a lot of disorientation, confusion, fear, anger, did a lot of rage tweeting, and I read a lot of books. And then I took 2 steps forward. First, I started walking dogs. I needed to do something good that had nothing to do with the internet. So I volunteered at the Humane Society, and it's been great. I walk the dogs every week, and the dogs help me to heal. The second thing I did, I decided to write this book, Planning for Everything. It's a book about the design of paths and goals. And I wrote it because our society and many of our organizations are broken, and planning opens a door to change. Most of us are familiar with Aesop's fable about the hard-working ants and the poor, starving grasshopper. It's a tale we tell our kids. And the moral of the story is clear. Plan or die. It's a truth of nature that we have assimilated into our culture and lived with for thousands of years. Now, in psychology, planning is seen as an executive function of the brain. And researchers study our varying abilities, how they change across demographic, age, and other variables. And they use games like the Tower of London and the Tower of Hanoi to study people's planning abilities. Interestingly, the folks who are best at simple versions of the game are the pre-planners, the people who plan and then make the moves. But add a few rings, add some complexity, and those folks struggle. It turns out that the people who do best at the more complex versions of the games are those who act and plan concurrently and iteratively. So, over the years, studies have shown that we all vary widely in how and how well we plan. The good news is that planning is a skill, and we can all get better. Now, despite all the usual claims of human exceptionalism, we are not the only animals that plan. The bonobo, for instance, will carry her baby and this stone up to a mile to a big flat rock slab where she can crack open nuts to feed her baby. And in fact, all animals plan. And we plan all the time. As Jeff Hawkins explained, our brains use stored memories to constantly make predictions about everything that we see, feel, prediction is not just one of the things your brain does. It's the primary function of the neocortex and the foundation of intelligence. More recently, Martin Seligman argues in Homo Prospectus that the perception and emotion are shaped to an enormous degree by expectations, by predictions. He asks the question, what if emotion is not agitation from the now, but guidance for the future? An idea or a plan pops into our mind, but we feel a twinge of fear based on a prediction of a danger that we may never see. Now, if you're a practical person who wants to learn how to plan, you might read Getting Things Done. It's a great book. It's absolutely worth reading. But I have a few concerns. It focuses on productivity. It advocates a system that's one size fits all. And it argues that there's one right way to plan. But planning is about so much more than productivity. It's about our relationship with the future. It's about how we anticipate and explore the garden of forking paths. And it involves the ways that we define and form meaning and purpose in our lives. So I take an opposite approach. I define planning as the design of paths and goals. And I believe that those of us in this community, we have a tremendous opportunity to use design, principles and practices and methods and tools of design to make planning visible so that everyone can see there are many good ways to plan. We also have an enormous opportunity to engage in strategic design by helping executives to see and touch and feel and hear what's possible. This is a map of the night sky. It's called a star finder. And this is also a mnemonic that I'm using for 4 principles and for 6 practices that I hope you will all remember. So, 4 principles. If we want to get better at planning, we need to make planning more social, tangible, agile, and reflective. We need to involve people early and often. We need to get the ideas out of our head into the world. We need to plan for disruption. And we need to question everything. Those are the 4 principles. And then we have 6 practices: framing, imagining, narrowing, deciding, executing, and reflecting. And they help for you to think of them as phases, but keep in mind that planning is non-linear. So framing is about how we understand and explain our plans. How do we translate our needs and wants and feelings and values and beliefs into vision and goals? Often, we stop before we've even had a chance to get started. We have an idea, occurs in our mind, and something stops us. Fear. In The Art of Fear, Kristen Ulmer, who was for many years was one of the world's most extreme skiers, one point, she was voted in the top 10 of the people most likely to die skiing. She eventually recognized the craziness of what she was doing, and for the last few decades, she's become an advisor helping people to deal with fear. And she argues that we should aim for a relationship with fear that's based more in curiosity, sort of asking, why am I afraid? And let me explore this fear. And that we should, in cases where we decide we want to move forward, we should frame or think of fear through the lens of adventure. Because life is too short to play it safe, because repression doesn't work. Imagining is about expanding our awareness of paths and possibilities by using models and prototypes and sketches and search. Charles Snyder argued that hope is the sum of willpower and way power. Way power is about using our creativity to always find a better or a different way. Folks with high willpower but low way power, they're the ones that always are beating their heads against the same brick wall. Flip it around. Folks with high way power but low willpower, those are the folks who are always frustrated by unrealized plans and dreams. They're always on to the next idea, but they never get anything done. Fortunately, imagining can help us grow both. Christopher Alexander has illustrated this beautifully through his books and his buildings and his work. He has shown how we can use stories and sketches and models and prototypes to build motivation, to help inspire people, to give people a glimpse of the plan or the dream. And imagining also helps us to become more aware of our options, which is important, because options let us be stupid. Options provide us with a way around immovable objects that we fail to predict. Narrowing is about evaluating and filtering paths and options. Now we're starting to narrow to sort of get closer to a decision by using drivers and levers and estimates and risks. Drivers help us eliminate options. So take a wedding, for instance. The budget and the number of guests are drivers. Once you define those, you're going to drastically reduce the set of what's possible. Levers, on the other hand, help us solidify or strengthen possible paths by showing how we can amplify force. So on the web, for instance, search is a lever. It helps us to answer the question, if we take this path, can we make it work? So, in the process of narrowing, we search the possibility space. And novices tend to search depth first, whereas experts do the opposite. They search breadth first. Let me provide a simple personal example. Several years back, I decided that I wanted to take our family on a Caribbean vacation. And I started researching the islands. And I came upon the Turks and Caicos, and they looked amazing. Now, If I'd gone depth first, I would have started researching hotels and restaurants and things to do, and I could have spent a lot of time. But I'm no novice when it comes to travel, so I started looking at flight prices. And they were crazy expensive. Flights to the Turks and Caicos were 3 times that of many nearby islands. I have no idea why, but we went to St. Thomas instead. So think about how you can search breadth first as you move through this narrowing process. Deciding is about committing to and communicating a belief, path, or goal, and defining the metrics for success. In deciding, and in planning in general, it may help to work backwards. For instance, to write the instructions before you make the decision. And by the way, every World IAD slide deck has to have a photograph of solar. It's a rule. Getting things done isn't just about perseverance or grit or what I like to call spirit. We also need to listen to feedback. We need to plan for disruption. We need to be prepared to learn and to change. And so the biggest mistake in executing is to think that the planning is done. As Eric Ries suggests in the Lean Startup, this is where we face the most difficult decision of whether to pivot or persevere. And that question may send us back to framing and imagining and narrowing and deciding. Now, one way to improve the quality of our decisions is to build a diverse team. Because different people will find different ways around unpredictable objects and obstacles. So we have reflecting, which is about looking back and looking within with the intent of changing how we move forward. It's not just about nostalgia and fondly looking back at the past. If it's done right, reflection changes direction. And as Gary Kasparov tells us, this is something we're not so good at. He likes to ask a question that folks have a really hard time answering. When was the last time you made a bad decision? Maybe something to reflect on when you have time. We don't like to look back because it hurts to admit we were wrong. It can be painful to contemplate change. And because nobody likes to relive bad experiences. But as I said before, repression doesn't work. And recovery requires that we learn to tell the truth. And please don't think that I'm talking about someone else. We are all villains and victims of cultural trauma. And we've all been lying to ourselves. Elephant society is matriarchal. The oldest female leads the way. And in times of drought, she may be the only one who remembers the ancient paths to food and water. But these days, those ways may be blocked by roads and farms. And so to survive, the elephants must often abandon the wisdom and culture and traditions that have helped them to survive. In an era of disruption, isn't this our problem too? I haven't talked directly about findability and misinformation because that's not the root of the problem. The algorithms of Google and Facebook and Twitter are not hurting us by mistake. They are the deliberate and inevitable result of perverse incentives. And so are the dark patterns for which many of us are responsible. The root of the problem is ethics. And if we hope to get better, we must change the cultures of our organizations and of our society. And we must start by telling the truth. There are no externalities. We need a new story that's honest about the consequences of our actions on others. And we need a vision of the future that includes empathy for all sentient beings. That's what I mean by planning for everything. Thank you for your understanding, and I hope you enjoyed my talk. So, we've got plenty of time for questions. I will ask, let me know when we're running out of time, but for now, I'm happy to engage in conversation or answer questions about anything and everything. We have a mic, so please put up your hand if you want to speak up. We've got one over here.
Thanks, Peter. Hopefully starting with a really easy question. The swan showed up on several slides, and I'm curious what the symbolism is.
Thanks for asking that. And that is a relatively easy one. So Nassim Taleb wrote a book called The Black Swan quite a few years back. He's written some other interesting books, one called Anti-Fragile. So the black swan is a symbol for a massive, unpredictable event. An event which may have been unpredictable because it was almost impossible to imagine. The term comes from centuries ago. Europeans had only ever seen white swans, right? So from using the principle of induction, to a European, all swans were white. And then someone journeyed off to Australia and discovered that all the evidence was gone like that. There were black swans. So it's something that's sort of impossible to imagine. People just never thought that it might be true. And so he uses September 11th as one example of a black swan event. We found it so impossible to imagine that we had very few defenses against it. And he argues that black swan events happen more than we like to admit. As soon as they happen, we come up with a bunch of rationalizations of like, yeah, we could have seen that coming, or maybe I thought it was going to happen, but we forget the moment where something totally outside our imagination occurs, and we have to reshape our mental models of the world. So that's what the black swan is. There's someone back there.
You talked about the impetus for this train of thought being the supporting work with the Fortune 500 company. And I was hoping we could talk about how the Starfinder framework would play out with a client like that, in that kind of situation.
That's a great question and a difficult one because I just finished the book and haven't had much time to even think about how I'm going to apply it in the real world. So I do, part of the reason, so whenever I write a book, there are many reasons why I write it in different ways that I think about or frame the work for myself. So, planning is one way of framing information architecture and user experience. We are all engaged in helping our clients to plan their websites and software, to plan user experiences and cross-channel journeys. And so I feel like this framework gives one of the things that the Finder piece of it does, that stretches out the planning process. Right? And I mean, six phases or practices, that's kind of a really elongated way of thinking about planning. And I think one practical way of maybe making progress is to sort of think about a matrix. Take the 4 principles and the 6 practices and look at the points of intersection. Right? So where does, and think about, for my organization and for the challenges that we're facing, what might be 1 or 2 points of intersection where we can improve? So we might say, let's look at, maybe if we're having problems moving from narrowing to deciding, right? Maybe we need to narrowing is a hard, painful process where you're taking a bunch of great ideas and you're kind of limited down to what you're actually going to do. So maybe you look at making that more social, right? Let's involve some people in this process and do it together so we can help one another get through that part of the process. So that's one idea I have, is sort of think of the principles and the practices in a matrix and look at, take 1 or 2 steps forward and just see, can we get a little bit better at how we're planning? Others? Naomi? Yes.
Thanks, Nick. I was thinking about something you said about executing, about this question of whether to pivot or persevere, and I love the idea of this continuous planning. But in my experience, that can be difficult in an organization. Think about something like the Manhattan Project, which I heard, I don't remember which one, but one of the scientists who worked on that basically saying, after the outbox was invented, there were misgivings about it, but the machine had already been put in motion and was unstoppable. Or the Challenger explosion, where there was a scientist to give a warning, but the machine was already in action. There was no way to stop it. In my experience, it operates that way in a lot of organizations, that even during the execution phase, there can be new information, but sort of no way to slow things down and make the pivot. What are your thoughts about that challenge?
Yeah, so, and it's interesting you mentioned the Manhattan Project, because there's actually a quote in the book by Oppenheimer. He quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, because he's realized what he has brought into the world. One of the things that I've always found most disturbing in our sort of intertwined communities of web and software and design and so forth is when people act like there's one right way to do things. And so, we've seen this with Agile, for instance, right? So I talk quite a bit about the Agile in the book because there's a huge amount of planning, of interesting ways of thinking about planning that's part of the Agile and Lean approaches. But, different approaches work in different environments. If I'm building software, I may have opportunities to make changes late in the process that I can't do if I'm creating a building like this. Right? So in the process of planning and executing, we need to be aware of what can be changed and what can't be changed at what points in the process. I do think that often we make assumptions that something can't be changed when it can. We lock into a certain way of doing things, and we want to march forward and not change course, but we totally can. So part of what I'm trying to, part of what I emphasize in the book, what I'm trying to encourage, is for us all to be more aware, to be more mindful, to question, is it really too late to change this? And also to anticipate, right? To recognize, what is the point of no return? Let's be really careful that we don't commit ourselves prematurely, or we don't go down the wrong path, because once we get past that point, we can't go back. So, in every context, there's a different point of no return, and we should be mindful of it. But we also shouldn't fool ourselves that we've gone past it when we haven't. I have no idea what the time is, so 10 minutes? Okay, so we have a few more minutes.
Hi, my name is Mike Lee. You might have seen me. I'm in Florida at some point. I really appreciate how you talk about emotional intelligence and empathy. There's discourse online recently about how to be objective, you must somehow separate yourself from the emotions. Can you speak to that in terms of how empathy and emotional intelligence can instead help you better understand the problem?
I will try. So I don't really believe in objectivity. I'm not sure it really exists. I think it's something often people in power pretend that they have objectivity so they can get, we all do that to some degree as parents, right? This is the right way for objective reasons. It's really, there's a little bit of what I want in there. We're all hypocrites. We're all hypocrites. But emotion is one of the most most interesting surprises for me as I started to dig into planning and thinking about planning, was the emotional piece. And this idea that, so in that book, Homo Perspectives, where the authors argue that one of the most important parts of being human is our ability to predict and anticipate the future. They talk about the huge role of emotion in this, and they talk about two different kinds or ways of experiencing emotion. The first is full-blown emotion, right? Something bad happens, right? Or I do something stupid, and we feel that full-blown emotion with our entire body. We've all been there and done that, but we don't do it every day, right? Have that full-blown emotion. That's a way of really, our body and our mind really get our attention and say, let's not do that again, ever, right? But we feel another way of experiencing emotion is something that happens all the time. We feel twinges of emotion when we think about doing something, right? We think about doing something. Maybe I'll go here and do that, or talk to this person and do this. And we feel a twinge. Remember when you did that last time? didn't work out so well. Don't do that. Right? So these twinges of emotion guide our behavior and our decision making and our planning, and we're often not even aware it's really going on. Right? Again, we have these thoughts and we discard them really quickly. Again, I think it's helpful to be a little bit more mindful of how this is happening. So in that way, I feel that emotion is guiding our thinking and our planning and our behavior much more than we recognize. And as far as decision making, in an organizational context, for instance, I feel like, on the one hand, emotion should get out of control, but on the other hand, we should listen to ourselves. Right? Emotions are part of that, our lizard brain, right? Much older than that prefrontal cortex. There's a lot of wisdom in our emotion. It's not always right. It's also the source of prejudice. So we have to be careful. But when our lizard brain is sort of warning us, something doesn't feel right, it's worth listening to. So again, the sort of the high level takeaway for me is to be more aware and more mindful of how emotions are kind of the role that they're playing in our thinking and our planning and our doing. What else? I don't think it's bad to stop a few minutes early and do a transition. So thank you all for your attention.